Hey guys, welcome back to the Coffee and Cartridges podcast. Today we're going to talk about how you should rate and compare rifle cartridges. Stay tuned. Alright, so probably going to say a lot of controversial things today. I might upset a few people. Hopefully not. Don't take this as I'm trying to upset anybody. Just offering my opinion. And I'm just going to talk about some things that we do when we're thinking of how one cartridge compares to another cartridge. And maybe rethinking some of this so that we can be fair, of course, and just understand how the angles that everyone's coming from. But I think there's some real concrete things we can do and look at as we compare these cartridges. And I think I am going to have a few rants just kind of threw in here, but it's not to upset anybody. It's just talking about rifle cartridges. It should not be an upsetting thing. Shouldn't be something you take personal. But we're just going to sit down, drink some coffee, and just talk about this today. And so let's just get into it. So I've got so much to say. I don't know where to begin. I don't want to make this too long, but just got a lot of opinions, I guess. All right, so I'm just going to start with this. I'm not going to go in depth in every one of these, I don't think, but you know, there's efficiency, there's energy, there is the overbore of a cartridge, there's versatility, there's availability, there's practicality, and then there's terminal performance, which is the bullet. And that's just some things we use to figure out and how we're going to compare things, you know. Sometimes those on the hunting side focus as their primary focus on muzzle velocity, and sometimes people on the target shooting side, especially long range target shooting side, focus more on ballistic coefficiency. And there becomes almost this this conflict between the two, when in reality there shouldn't be a conflict. Both are tremendously important attributes of a good cartridge or a good load. But usually any cartridge that comes out or has been out for a long time is viewed in the lens of a hunter's eyes or a target shooter's eyes, and that definitely can skew your viewpoint. I know a lot of people that just don't understand why someone would like a particular cartridge, but it's because they're a hunter and that cartridge just doesn't appeal to them, and vice versa. We also put on nostalgia colored glasses, if that's a thing, where we only tend to favor or think highly or speak highly of those cartridges that we have personal experience with and that we have a long history with, which is understandable, of course. Or we're the latest greatest, and if it's not the latest greatest, then it's obsolete to us. And I think we go too far in both of those extremes. Of course, we become very brand sensitive. If it's not a loophole scope, if it's not a Nosler bullet, or whatever rifle, you know, manufacturer, then it can't be any good. And in reality, all bullet manufacturers make some good bullets. There's lots of good scopes out there and lots of good rifle companies, but we become brand sensitive. And I'm not saying there's really anything wrong with any of that. You know, if you buy a Mossberg Patriot and it shoots terrible, kind of like on backfire, he had one that just, no matter what they did, no matter how many times they sent it in, it shot terrible. You're going to have a bias against that rifle, and I would too. And I would be very hesitant in buying another Mossberg because of that, because of a bad experience. There's really nothing you can do about that. A bad experience is just going to taint your view of a particular bullet, scope, rifle, whatever. That's just human nature, and that's just reality. And I can't say there's anything wrong with that. And then someone else has a great experience, and so now they're a big fan of that particular rifle, cartridge, or scope. But the key is, it's okay for people to have different views on the same rifle. Just because you love a cartridge doesn't mean someone else should love it. Just because you hate a certain rifle because of a bad experience, which I don't blame you for hating it, doesn't mean someone else has had that same experience. Let's start with BC. That's a very controversial one. I've seen YouTubers that have just flat out said, it doesn't matter. BC does not matter for hunting. And I disagree. Now, I shoot a 308 here in Missouri for white-tailed deer, and when I'm picking a bullet, I don't really focus on BC because I know my range is not that long and it's not that important of a factor. So I can definitely see times where BC doesn't matter that much, or it's not an important factor. But to say that BC doesn't matter, it's going to matter a little at every distance, but obviously at 1,000 yards, it's going to matter a lot more than at 300 yards. There's no question about that. Let's just say 500 yards is ethical hunting distances. You may agree or disagree, but let's just say that. 1 to 300 yards, it's definitely going to have less of an impact. But from 300 to 500 yards, BC does have a big impact. And for those people, several people in my comment section have said BC does not matter. Yes, it does. Here's what you got to focus on. Don't focus on wind drift numbers and drop numbers, because those are going to be very insignificant in hunting distances. Those numbers are really only going to become dramatic improvements at, say, 1,000 yards. If all things are the same cartridge, same bullet weight, or close to the same bullet weight, but yet say PowerPoint versus Accubon long range. In my opinion, two great bullets, but they have totally different bullet designs, bullet constructions, and different BCs. At 500 yards, let's say 180 grain Accubon versus 180 grain PowerPoint. That Accubon long range is going to be significantly better at retaining its energy and velocity at 500 yards versus the PowerPoint. Is there going to be a difference in drop? Yes. Does that really matter in today's time? I don't think so, because as long as you know your ballistics, you can account for the drop. And the wind drift, will it be better at bucking the wind at 500 yards? Yes. Will it be a dramatic thing? No. In fact, it could be less of an impact than you just maybe slightly moving with your shot. So you're having to assume an awful lot, including a perfect shot from you, than to think that 1 or 2 inches of wind drift is going to be a tremendous benefit. So I think when you focus on wind drift and drop in hunting distances, it seems like there's really no point to BC. Of course, at 1,000 yards, it's a much bigger gap when it comes to wind drift and drop. But that retainment of energy and velocity in that Accubon long range versus that PowerPoint is tremendous. When it gets there at 500 yards, it's got a lot more energy, a lot more relative, but it has definite more energy, even though it might have started out the exact same, and it's still going to be going much faster, even though it might have started out the same speed. So to be going faster, which aids in expansion and penetration, and to have more energy, which is just a metric that we go by, there's no way you can say that is insignificant at 300 to 500 yards. Even at 300 yards, it's going to be significant. So BC definitely plays a factor. Just think about this. You got 2 bullets, it's the same rifle, same cartridge, same bullet weight, same barrel length, and I say they're basically going to do the same. They have similar construction, but one has a BC that's 100 points higher. Which one would you pick? Why on earth would you not pick the one with the better BC? I just don't understand that. BC does matter. Does it matter to me when I'm shooting my 308 in forests and stuff? No, it's not enough of an effect to have a big difference. I might even go down to 130 grain copper bullet in that case that doesn't have a good BC at all. So there are times where the BC is definitely not the biggest factor, but to just say a blanket statement like BC doesn't matter for hunting is not true. All right, next controversial statement, our next controversial topic, energy. I'm not going to go into all the things about energy. I made another coffee and cartridges all about hydrostatic shock. Is it real? So I'm not going to go into any of that. But energy is just simply a metric. Energy is just muzzle velocity and bullet weight. And it really takes those two things into account and gives you a metric, gives you a number to look by. It in itself is, might not be the thing you need to focus on, but it's a great way to know how much energy, power, knockdown, velocity, whatever you want to say, damage is going to do at a particular distance. So for those people that say energy doesn't matter, it's all about this or that, well, yeah, but energy is just a metric. It's just a measuring stick. It's just telling you how much it's taking into account the mass of the bullet or the weight, and it's taking into account the muzzle velocity. And then once you start to go down range, it also takes into account ballistic coefficient, because the higher the BC, the more retained energy you're going to have. It's just a good all-around number. If you're trying to decide whether this bullet out of this cartridge at that range for that game animal is adequate, why not have some kind of measuring system that tells you? And energy is that. So definitely energy matters. Now when it comes down to muzzle velocity, everyone agrees it's very important. But sometimes when we're comparing cartridges, we just completely skim over that, or we don't compare them like we should. I've seen a lot of comparisons between 6.5 Creedmoor and say 308. And the first thing people will say is 6.5 Creedmoor is just is a higher BC than 308. That's a dumb statement. I think the ignorance there comes from just looking at factory options. And generally the bullets in a 6.5 Creedmoor are like 130 to 140, maybe 150, and those are generally all pretty high BC. And most of your options in the 308 are 130 to 180, and they're not as high BC. So then you make an ignorant statement like 6.5 is better BC than 308. Whether you're talking about the caliber or whether you're talking about those cartridges, that's not true. It just simply comes down to what manufacturers make. Manufacturers go on what people want. And generally speaking, people don't want the extreme high BC bullets in a 30 caliber because of recoil. And we're going to get to that in a second, recoil. But because it's a lot of recoil to get that same BC in a 30 caliber bullet, most people that use 30 caliber cartridges get the lower, lighter weight, faster going bullets. It's just simple as that. But yet if you're going to go down to 6.5, you're definitely not going to get the energy or the speed. Well, I mean, you can get the speed if you go down to like a 100 grain bullet, 120, but why not take advantage of that lower recoil? And so 6.5 caliber, for instance, more people are okay with the recoil of 140 grain 6.5 bullet versus a 210 grain 30 caliber bullet. So why not, since people are okay with that, make bullets for that? It's just as simple as that. But if you hand load, then you know. It's just a simple matter of physics. There's no such thing as one caliber having better BC than another. And to say the 6.5 Creedmoor has better BC than the 308 is just not right. I mean, maybe you're thinking of factory options. So I'll just show it on the screen here. If you go to Berger's manual and you go to the 6.5 Creedmoor, shows right on there, a 140 grain bullet, shows the BC right there, pretty good BC. But you can also go to their 230 grain bullet in the 308 or 30-06, for instance, that's got a much higher BC. Well, not, I would say much higher, but it's got a higher BC. And it says all you need is a 1 in 10 twist for that bullet. So, I mean, yeah, that 230 grain bullet's going to be a lot for a 308. Can it do it? Yeah, but it's going to go so far down in the case, wouldn't be worth it. In a 30-06, in a 300 Win Mag, no problem. 300 Weatherby especially, no problem. So you put that 230 grain bullet in a 30-06, it's got a higher BC than the 140 grain in the 6.5 Creedmoor, just got a lot more recoil. Or you could go to their website right now. They have the Berger extreme outer limits bullet that's 156 grain, and it's got an even higher BC. But you can also go to a 245 grain extreme outer limits bullet in 30 caliber. It's got a BC over 800. Now it does say that you need a 1 in 9 twist, so that could be an issue there. But the whole thing about this cartridge has better BC than this cartridge, you really need to think that through. Now there's versatility, which we'll talk about in a minute, and yes, you can. Some cartridges are more versatile, some calibers are more versatile because of what people buy and because of what manufacturers make. But I've seen a lot of people compare cartridges and they say things like that, like, well, the 6.5 at 1,000 yards is just going to be way better. It's going to retain its energy and velocity better than, say, a 30-06. Yeah, but you're comparing like 140 grain bullet in a 30-06 and 140 grain bullet in a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's not a good comparison. Now, sometimes people will compare the same bullet weight in multiple calibers for a specific purpose because they're trying to show us something. But generally speaking, you shouldn't do that. In my opinion, just my opinion, you should compare the bullets with the same BC or sectional density. One of those two. And they pretty much go hand in hand. It's not going to be a whole lot of difference. But I use BC. So if I'm going to compare 143 grain 6.5 caliber cartridge to just generally speaking to a 30 caliber, I would get an equivalent like 210, 230 grain bullet if I really want to do a deep dive and try to get that even. That's a better way to compare. A lot of really good YouTube channels I've seen make really weird comparisons where they're not comparing the same BC or sectional density of the bullet. It's okay to not do that, but then you brag on how this one is going to be flatter and retain its energy at longer ranges because it has a higher BC. It's because you chose that comparison. So it's just really odd to me. Here's another one, efficiency. I've had people tell me they do not care about efficiency. It means nothing to them. I've made a lot of videos about the most efficient cartridge and things like that. Now there's no right way to look at this. If you don't care about efficiency, you don't care about efficiency, that's fine. But my question is, why wouldn't you care about efficiency? I don't understand why you wouldn't care about it. It doesn't have to be your priority, but why wouldn't you care about it? So I'm going to show on the screen Reloader 17 in a 300 short mag. Look at how many grains, I think it's like 64 grains of Reloader 17 in a 300 short mag with the same barrel length as we're getting ready to show in a 300 Win mag. And look at the velocity, okay? Now let's look at that 300 Win mag with, I'm not looking at it right now, but I believe it's 6 or 7 more grains of that exact same powder, same barrel length, and you're gonna get out of the Win mag in the teens, like 15 or something more feet per second. So you have 6 or 7 grains more powder just to get like 15 feet per second more. That's a clear demonstration of efficiency. That doesn't mean you need to like the short mag over the Win mag. What you like is up to you, obviously. You might say, well, I'm going to be shooting 220 grain 30 caliber bullets, and to me it's going to be better than that 300 Win mag. Or you might say, I just feel like the feeding potential is smoother in a Win mag over a short mag. Or you could have many other reasons for picking the Win mag, and that's a-okay. And you might even say, efficiency is not the thing I care about the most. I care about something else more. Okay, that's fine. But to say I just don't care about efficiency is an odd statement to me. Why wouldn't you care about efficiency? Why wouldn't you think, all things being equal, that's pretty cool, but I can get basically the same performance with 6 grains less powder per shot. You times that by 10, you have 60 grains. You've basically got a whole nother round you can load every 10 shots. So you're saving money, it's going to be less recoil. Now, are you going to see a big difference? Bullet weight being the same? Probably not. Will you be able to tell that difference in your shoulder? Probably not, but it's there. It potentially will have less, well, not potentially, it will have less recoil. Whether you feel that or not, I'm not sure. Less recoil, saving money, getting the same performance. Why wouldn't you care about efficiency? I don't understand that. If you could get the same bullet weight, go on the same speed, but have better BC, why wouldn't you do that? If you could get everything being equal, the same performance, but have less powder being used and less recoil, why wouldn't you do that? All right, so let me get to recoil. Next topic that might be a little bit controversial. I heard a lot of people tell me they don't care about recoil. It means nothing. You might say, look, recoil is not important to me because I want this weight bullet in this construction of a bullet going this speed. That's what I want, because I know then the trajectory and I know how much energy it's going to have and I know what I want it to do to the animal. That's what I care about. I don't care about how much recoil that is going to give me. That's a very logical way to look at it. Got no problem with that. You accept to get what I want. This is the recoil. There's an equal and opposite force. No problem with that. But let me ask you this. Why do you have that giant recoil pad on the back end of that rifle if it doesn't mean anything to you? Why are you using a suppressor? Why are you using a muzzle brake? And then you might say, well, it takes a little bit of the recoil out, a little bit of the sting out. I can shoot better if I have those things on there. That's the whole point. That's why recoil matters. To act like it's some manly contest where, oh, you can't take the recoil? Yeah, I don't have any trouble with the recoil. Why are you always talking about recoil? Are you a wimp? Who says I can't take it? That's got nothing to do with it. Why do I want to take it? Maybe I do want to take it because I know it's a risk reward and I know that I'm willing to take that recoil to get the reward. That's logical. But to act like it doesn't mean anything. Once again, why wouldn't you want better BC? Why wouldn't you want more efficiency? Why wouldn't you want less recoil? I don't understand. All right, next topic, barrel life. Another hot topic. People say, I don't care about barrel life. And when we're talking about barrel life, we're talking about how overbore is the cartridge. There are plenty of ways of measuring this and comparing it. Take how many grains of powder minus the caliber, and that gives you an overbore rating. And so if you have 100 grains of powder and then you subtract the caliber, which is say 22 caliber, you're left with a lot. You take 100 grains of powder and you subtract 37 on the caliber, you got a smaller number. So if you just look at it that way, that's kind of an overbore rating. That's my redneck overbore rating. Take the amount of grains in the load minus the caliber. The bigger the number, the more overboard that it is. It's just simply that amount of powder going through how big of a diameter of a bore. And the smaller the diameter, it's just being forced through a smaller hole. Same amount of powder, same amount of burn, same amount of fire and force going through a smaller hole is going to shorten the life of that barrel by deteriorating the throat. Simple as that. Now, without question, barrel life doesn't have to be that big of a deal to the hunter. And it's usually more of a deal to a target shooter because they're shooting a lot more. It's simple as that. Target shooter, whether it's competition or for fun, shoots a lot at the range. They just do it consistently. It's a hobby. Barrel life means more to them probably. You're a hunter, you sight your gun in before season, make a few practice shots, know your drops, go out there, and you might not shoot more than 15, 20 rounds a year. Obviously, it's not that important. But when you're rating a cartridge or you're comparing cartridges, it's definitely a factor. Another reason why I like the 308. I'm going to get to availability here in a second, but 308 is very available and has a tremendous barrel life. So, to me, that's a plus for a 308. Once again, all things being equal, if something has a barrel life twice as long. Why wouldn't you want that? Doesn't mean you need that. Doesn't mean, like, let's just say you're comparing 300 short mag versus 308. 308's got 3 times, if not more, the barrel life of the 300 short mag. But that might not mean anything to you because you don't care, because you're using the 300 short mag just for hunting. So it doesn't mean that it's the factor you're going to pick when you're picking your cartridge, which is definitely a factor, and it definitely goes into its rating. Now, I have a 6.5 284. It is pretty overbore. All cartridges with the same case capacity going down in caliber is just going to get more overbore. A 270 is more overbore than a 30-06. 243 is more overbore than a 308. My 6.5 284 is more overbore than a 284. Therefore, it's going to have the same amount of powder going down a smaller hole. It's going to have a shorter barrel life. Now, to me, with the 6.5 284, it's not that big of a deal. To a lot of people, I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's definitely a factor. It's definitely something to consider. All right, versatility. I'm not going to go into this in a ton because I spent so much time in my one cartridge to rule them all. But versatility, if you're talking about just one cartridge and you're not going to have multiple cartridges, is really king. It's really where it all comes down to. But since I talked so much about it in that video, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But it's just versatility on range. Does it have enough oomph at the beginning with its muzzle velocity to still be effective at 400 to 500 yards? Does it have range when it comes to literal range of killing, distance? And then the big thing about versatility also is its bullet weights. 30 caliber, for instance, is very versatile. 25 caliber is not versatile. 33 caliber is really versatile. 32 caliber or 8 millimeter is not versatile. It has nothing to do with the physics of the caliber. It just simply means manufacturers don't make a lot of bullet ranges, and they don't twist the barrels fast enough to accommodate those bullet ranges because there's no demand from the consumer. That's all that it matters. But versatility can be a very important factor, especially if you have only one cartridge. Then it might be the number one factor. Of course, there's terminal performance. That really comes down to the bullet. Today we're talking more about cartridges, so we're just going to kind of skip over that. Another factor is practicality. So in most of my videos, I don't really go into availability or practicality, which sounds crazy that I don't, but I focus more on just the design of the cartridge, because I don't want to get into your grandpa's favorite, or this or that, or anything like that. Or the practicality could depend on the rifle. You might be shooting this in a lot of different rifles. I just focus on, I just take those things out of the equation, focus on the design of the cartridge and all that. But practicality, of course, comes into play at the end of the discussion, if not at the beginning. For instance, maybe you like a 270 Winchester more than a 270 short mag because you typically can get 5 cartridges, loaded cartridges in your magazine versus only 3. That might be an important aspect to you. Maybe you like a 300 H&H Magnum more than a 300 short mag because the way that the 300 H&H is designed, it feeds so smoothly, and potentially, I think they fixed the issue, but potentially the 300 short mag won't feed as easy. So maybe you're going to be hunting elk or moose in bear country, and if a bear does charge you and you need to get multiple rounds off, you want to make sure you have a cartridge that cycles easily. That's practical things, right? And the weight of your rifle and other things come into play. So there's also the practical side of it. But we're gonna end today with availability, because this is really the be-all, end-all. This is where everything gets separated into, and this usually comes down to where people make their final decisions. I talked about earlier, we look at things in the lens of a hunter or a target shooter. We also look at things in the lens of a factory ammo shooter or a reloader. And these can be major differences. And if you're only shooting factory ammo, you're going to want something you can find. And so I like my 6.5 284. I like my 270 short mag. It's tough to find components for them. And when you do, they're really expensive. Supply and demand. There's not a big supply because there's not as big of a demand, right? But the people that do want them, like me, have been waiting and waiting and waiting. And because there is a following for that cartridge, as soon as it pops up, they're willing to get it because of the scarcity, regardless of the price. So if you're just a guy who wants to get a rifle and be able to go down to the hardware store and get bullets for it, you really need to avoid 270 short mag and 6.5 284. You need to get something more like 308, 30-06, 270, 7 mag, 6.5 Creedmoor. Things like this, 243, are very popular, easy to find, and availability is good. But like I said, I generally don't talk about availability on my channel because that's not what I focus on. I'm focused on like the design aspects of the cartridge. And you might look at a 270 Winchester as the greatest cartridge of all time because of nostalgia, because of performance, because of successful hunts. But I might be looking at it as a 27 caliber bullet in a 30-06 sized case. It has 30-06 sized case capacity and a 27 caliber bullet. And since I don't have a lot of the personal experience, I did own one at one time, but I've not had the personal experience doing a lot of hunting with it. So to me, I just break it down into those aspects. And I might say the 6.8 Western on paper is just a lot better. But because of availability, or I might say the 270 short mag is better in my opinion, or the 280 Remington is better in my opinion, 280 AI is better in my opinion. But as far as availability goes, the 270 Winchester is way more available than a 280, than a 280 AI, or a 270 short mag, and even the new 6.8 Western. I like the 308. Why? One main reason is I can go online right now and buy almost anything factory I want to buy. It's available. I can go down to Bass Pro right now. They've got a 4-foot or 8-foot section of 308, and it never seems to go dry. There's always something there to get from that well, and good luck finding a 270 short mag. You can't even find it online hardly. And so that's a big bonus to me for the 308. But I'm also a reloader. And so there's times I just don't care about what the price is of a factory loaded 6.5 284 because I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to buy the components separately. And I bought 100 Lapua casings a long time ago, and I've been using those, and they're holding up pretty good. The cases is really the main issue. If you can get the cases, you can find the rest, except for in our modern day, it seems like large rifle primers are pretty tough to get. But the cases, if you can find the cases, once you've got that, you're pretty well set. You can get the powder and the bullets and the primers usually relatively cheap and more available. And so availability to me is not that big of an issue, especially in my channel when I'm talking about comparing of cartridges. However, when it's all said and done, availability should be the number one thing that you think about, especially if you're not a reloader, because you need to know, am I going to find ammo or reloading components for this rifle? The two cartridges, I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers here. The two cartridges on my channel that I've had the most comments from people either tearing into me or just here to like show off is the 270 Winchester and the 7mm PRC. From two totally different camps. The only person I've ever banned from my channel was a person who would not stop calling me names, calling my other commenters all kinds of names, simply because I made a statement about the 7 PRC in a short. And if you've watched my channel, you know I'm a big fan of the 7 PRC. On paper, it's a tremendously good cartridge. I've not personally shot one yet, but I think it's a great design cartridge, one of the best. I'm a huge fan of it, but I made the statement, and I stand by this. If you've already got a 7 mag and you're well established with it, should you sell your 7 mag and go buy a 7 PRC? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's enough of a difference there to warrant you selling off an established rifle and cartridge that you're good with to go get something new. That's just my personal opinion. I stand by that. But because I said that in a short, this guy freaked out. But he's one of 50 that have made comments on me and other YouTube channels that I know of, where if you don't just absolute bow down and praise the 7PRC, they're here to get you. They're here to tell you that you're an idiot and that you don't know anything and you're an old fuddy-duddy and you just need to get out of you're just too old to understand, and all kinds of just nonsense because of the hype that's going on right now. And then from the complete other perspective, and this is not from one person, this is from several dozens of people, they love the 270. And why not? It's a great cartridge. It's got a great history, and people don't like a cartridge to the level of the 270 without it being a great cartridge. It stands on its merits, its successes. It's a great cartridge. But the main reason people like it more than the 280, for instance, is because it's more popular, because it's what they've used. They've had personal success with it, they have nostalgia for it, and they like it, okay? And that's a good reason to like it. And not as many people fell in love with the 280. It wasn't marketed as well as Winchester marketed the 270. It's not been around as long. It's just not a big success. The 280 was never a huge success. 270 has been and still is a big success. More people have it. It's more popular, therefore it's more available. Therefore you've got a lot of people who stand by it. I'll put polls out. What's your favorite 6.5 cartridge? And someone will say 270 Winchester. And I know they're joking. It's all fun. I'm not mad or nothing. But I mean, I've just never had any other two cartridges that garnered so much divisive comments, or just not hateful comments, but just combative comments as the 270 and the 7PRC. Why? Because one is so popular and one is so hyped at the moment because it's new and it's fresh and it's a good cartridge. And so there are times when you can't compare the 270 to anything, and because they don't want to hear it. It's 270, it wins, end of story. Why? Because they like it. I'm going to make you mad. In my opinion, the 280 is just as good as the 270, but more versatile. But you're not going to as easily go find ammo for it or rifles chambered in it. So if you ask me which one to pick, I'd probably say the 270 because of availability. But you take out availability on paper, I'd say pick the 280. Because it's basically the same thing, but yet bullet manufacturers have historically made a much wider, more versatile array of bullet weights. And you also can get a lot heavier, but you can also go down to 100 grain if you want. It's just a more versatile cartridge. Now that is changing a little bit in modern times. They are starting to come out with faster twist rates and expanding that 270 bullet range a little bit. But on paper, 270 versus 280, 280 wins. In real life, 270 versus 280, 270 wins. Why? Availability. In my mind, 6.5 284 is the best 6.5, end of story. But on paper, 6.5 PRC is better. Why? It's more available. It's on its way up. 6.5 284 is on its way down. I don't like it, but I understand it and I'm willing to admit that. What about the old 6.5 Creedmoor? I'll just leave it on the old 6.5 Creedmoor. So about 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the 6.5 Creedmoor was at that hype level as the 7PRC is now. And it was the greatest cartridge of all time. But we all know it wasn't. Well, from the lens of a hunter, it's not doing anything that much different than the 6.5 Swede, the 260, definitely not the 6.5 284, not even close to the 264 Win Mag. But they're just focused on hunting and they're just focused on muzzle velocity. So yeah, you're right. To the target shooter, hey, it's got a faster twist rate, tighter chamber tolerance. It's more of a match grade 6.5. So they liked it better. The reality was it's a great cartridge. It was tremendously overhyped, but it never stopped being a good cartridge. Well, it's kind of went on a roller coaster. It was extremely overhyped. Now it's becoming underhyped. Now there's so much hate toward it. I've heard many people call it the man bun of the rifle cartridges. And I even made that little short. It was tongue-in-cheek short where I talked about how it was the greatest cartridge of all time, and then I said, oh my gosh, what's this cartridge over here? And it was the Swede that's 100+ years older, basically getting the same velocity. But I see the merits of the Hornady cartridges. I see the merits of the 6.5 Creedmoor. But it's just like, it was overhyped, now it's underhyped. And same way, we can't compare anything against the 270 because the 270 has to win. And we can't compare anything to the 7mm PRC because the 7 PRC has to win. We kind of have a funny relationship with the 6.5 Creedmoor. For instance, a very popular cartridge on my channel with my viewers, you, is a 243 Winchester. I've had people from Australia and Europe and all over the world, in Canada, tell me how much that they love this cartridge. Of course, here in America, it's very popular. Very good cartridge. I've had many people tell me in person and on the internet how many game animals that they've killed and how much success that they've had with the 243 Winchester. Basically, it's hitting above its weight class over and over again. But yet, so many people think that the 6.5 Creedmoor is not a good hunting cartridge. Now think about that. Yes, it was overhyped for sure for a long time. But if you think the 243 is adequate for white-tailed deer, surely you think the 6.5 Creedmoor is as well. If you like the light recoiling 243 and think it can hit above its weight class, which I agree with you, why couldn't the 6.5 Creedmoor do that as well? It's just a 6.5 bullet versus a 6mm bullet. The 243 is more suitable, I think, for varmints and deer than the 6.5 Creedmoor because it can get all the way down there to 55 grains and go very fast. 6.5 Creedmoor can get down there into the 80s and 90 grain bullets as well and really get some good speed going. But it can get much higher BCs than what a 6mm can get. With that 243, you're going to top out at around 100 grains. With the 6.5 Creedmoor and that 1 1/8 twist, you're going to get up to like 156 grains. Way more BC. So if you think the 243 is a great cartridge, I totally agree with you. But if you don't think the 6.5 Creedmoor is a good cartridge, I don't know how you can put those two together. But we all can look at this from different perspectives. You might agree with half of what I said, disagree with half of it. That's okay. It's all fun. It's all just entertaining, I hope. But I think when we compare cartridges and we rate cartridges, there's a lot more thinking I think we need to do than just, well, I've used my 270 for 50 years and I've never had any problems with it, so no new cartridges even need to be invented. Or the other view, well, that 7mm PRC is so much better than every other cartridge that's ever been created that we need all to come together and get rid of all of our old cartridges and everyone go to 7 PRC. We're all different. We all want different things. We all look at it from a different point of view. And in reality, there's something good to say about every cartridge. And that's where I come from, and this is where my channel is about. I'm not team anything. And when I rate and compare cartridges, it doesn't mean I'm putting down any other cartridges. I like them all. I like all cartridges. Obviously, I like some more than other ones, but I just enjoy rifle cartridges. I think they're really cool, and I like talk about them with you. I like drinking coffee with you. And if you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. More videos like this coming out. And until next time, take care.